Um, my name is Jens Schröder-Fürstenberg. I'm working with the BSH as the head of the Nautical Application branch. I'm a master mariner from my professional point of view, and then I worked for a couple of years in a shipping company in Hamburg for ships planning and operation, and since 1999 I joined the BSH, and I was an editor for sailing directions, and I was a senior editor, and finally I'm the head of the group now. And additionally, I was a member of the SNIPBEC working group since 2002, and now I'm the chairman of this group. I have to apologize that I'm not able to welcome you in your language. I know only two languages, which is Japanese, konnichiwa, and Indonesian, selamat pagi. So I have not time to learn a little bit more. So let's start with the first question. So we have limited time, but the first question, what do you think is the mind capacity in gigabyte of your mind? You have an idea? So scientists are saying that the human mind capacity is 1.5 petabyte. That means 1.5 million gigabyte. We have 17,000 ENCs on the market already, and if each ENC would have a capacity of 5 megabyte, which is a maximum, we would have 85 gigabytes capacity. So theoretically, we are able to keep all the ENCs in our mind, and we don't need systems. That's the point. It's just training. If it comes from heart, then it's fine. I was allowed to have 20 minutes for the first part of my presentation, which is the legal basic. And but before we start, let's say that the lecture and a little bit of discussion, we have to discuss a little technical background of ACDIS. Who can explain this formula? I assume nobody from heart, so let's skip it. The 2 hours, we will discuss some legal basics, the production of ENCs. Also, I believe that the most of you are familiar with the production, ENC updating and distribution. So I learned from the presentations before that the most of you are either familiar with the production, or you are the head or the vice head of a group which produces ENC. And
Excuse me, Jens. I don't think your throat microphone is working.
I have no idea. I'm too loud or too?
Not loud enough.
Aha, okay. And shall I press one? Yeah, this is power off. Is this on now?
Much better.
Yeah? Okay. Yeah, we are. So, but most of the technical issues which are behind the production of the ENCs are maybe a little bit of hidden land for you, and I'm trying now to introduce it. The legal basics. Before we started with the introduction of ENCs for the shipping, there was some prerequisites which should be arranged in advance, and the most important one is that the IMO should allow ENCs as an equivalence to paper versions. So, but the IMO is a more general, it does this in a more general term. So the main chapter which is responsible for these chart production and publication handling is SOLAS Chapter 5. Has anyone read SOLAS Chapter 5 and knows the content of SOLAS Chapter 5? You know this? Or you know this a little bit, and you know where it is on your board. That's probably the best way. And SOLAS Chapter 5 has some regulations concerning ACDIS, or the use of the production of ENCs, or the use of ENCs in ACDIS system, so to say. And the first and the most important one is the definition of a nautical chart or nautical publication. Normally we would say, what is a nautical chart, what is nautical publication? You would say that is what I carry on board. But it's not the real truth. So that the publication or a chart must be produced by an hydrographic office or by an office which is allowed to produce it on behalf of the coastal state. So that is one of the main important part. And the IMO, they said it could be also a database which you could, which is able to reproduce the content of the chart and the publication. And if you have such a database on board which could do the work, then it is be an equivalent of the paper version. They doesn't, but SOLAS don't mention explicitly ENCs at this stage. So they say, well, just a database would fit it, and you can use whatever database you like. Finally, they recommend that the IHO standard should be followed for production of such a database, and then it finally becomes an ENC. So, and we are still working for databases for nautical publications. So I just should go through a little bit faster here. Regulation 18 we have deals with approval and the service and performance standards of publications and the requirements of shipborne under Regulation 19. Regulation 27, it's important to say the nautical charts and publication must be in a way on board that they are fulfilling of the navigational purpose, that you could use the chart for safe navigation. That means it would be not possible to navigate a ship safely with an ENC on board, which is an overview ENC. So it will not work correctly. Record of navigational activities means that the active system itself could be used as a replacement of the ship's logbook. And I've spoken with some active manufacturers who are involved in the type approval process at BSH, and they have too loud?
Yeah,
too
close.
Too close?
Yeah.
Shall I do this way? Okay, I was too close. The records of navigational activities. That means theoretically an active system could replace the ship's logbook. But actually we have no shipping company which has asked for doing this, because this would require an additional type procedure, typing approval procedure, and this has not been done yet. Safety navigation, avoidance of dangerous situations, that means the actors could be used for these purposes as well, and we have some very good examples on the market. The minimum requirements, that means the actors performance standards. There are some organizations involved before an actus becomes an actus on board. So we have the IAC publications, International Electronic Committee. They publish some standards related to actus, and the most important one is the standard 61174, which specifies the performance standards, the requirements of test methods, and the required testing results. And the other ones, 609045 and 62288, are related to this firstly mentioned standards. So this is, in brief, there are a lot of papers. When you intend to read this, you might have too much time or too less to work. So, but for actors manufacturers, it is important that they know exactly what these publications require, so that the actors systems fulfill these requirements. The test requirements, just in brief, are checking the system integrity. They're checking the chart function, the vector chart functionalities, raster chart functionalities. We all know that active systems could be run on ENCs and on raster charts. They're checking the interface, which is sometimes an issue. The interface could be complicated. So you might have a connection, or you might to install a connection between your GPS receiver and your active system, and you see that the bound rate is different, so that they can't talk each other. The backup is an issue. Backup, theoretically, who knows what the backup requirements for Actors is? Or are? Who knows this exactly? What are the backup requirements for the Active system itself? So, I mean, there are two independent Active systems. That is one solution. An Active system and a paper chart set as a backup. The paper chart backup, it's predefined the scales of the paper chart, so you cannot assume that you have a fulfill or a full equipped Active system with all ENCs you like, and your paper chart backup would be the Shell Atlas, so that it wouldn't work. So there's a set predefined by each hydrographic office which paper chart should be the equivalence for the ENCs in the Active system. If you have two Active systems, or what I'm now saying works for both versions, either two Active systems or Active system and paper chart, the voyage must be recorded on both systems. So you have to make your route planning and everything on both Active systems, the route check on both Active systems or on Active system and paper charts. Both systems must be up to date. They must have the newest edition of the charts, and so on and so on. That's what they do, and sometimes we have a physical connection between the two Active systems, so it's easily to transfer the data. When you have conducted the route planning procedure and the route check, and you see, well, my route is fine, then you transfer the waypoints from one system to another system. That might have some issues. So I was asked in the past to train the guys from the super yacht, which is called the Yacht A. You know, from Mr. Abramovich. It looks like a white submarine, very fancy ship. And there was no physical connection between two Active systems. And they said, well, we have no physical connection, neither we have an USB port. So how could we transfer the waypoints when we have checked the route from one system to another one? And I said, well, print it out, put it in again. So, and at this time we learned a bit about this fact, but I think the engineers, they have thought this is a good source to bring one virus from one system to another one if you have a physical connection or if you have a USB port. So if you print out and you put it in again, so you might have at least one independent or one not virus attacked system. Because Actors is just a software, it's just a software on your computer, you know. Robustness, some robustness tests will be performed, especially the vibration and the humidity and heat and the cold and whatever. Monitor test. The monitor test is somehow important because Actors is using different color scales for navigational purposes, or for showing waters which are navigable. So the monitor must be able to provide a clear color at every time. So that means if I say this color must be blue, then it shouldn't turn to light gray or to light green or a little bit of blue, so it must be blue every time. So, and the monitor test is so important that a part of one standard which is related to the Actors system has a little chapter about this monitor. And additional tests, we have additional tests. You know, the performance standards, they provide only, let's say, the core of what an Actors system should be able to do. So that means compared to a car, you say it has 4 wheels and some lights on it and an engine, and that's it. But if you have an electricity adjusted back mirror or whatever, that is an extra. And the extra is a selling argument for the Actors manufacturers. But sometimes the extras interfere with the original core, and they're doing some wrong things. So we, at the BSH, we have had tests where you plan a course across, let's say, across an island, and you don't get an alarm because it was based on such an additional function which was offered. So we rejected the system, and then they tried to softwaring this again. So that is, and the additional tests are, they require some very clever intelligence for the type approval company. So whereas the normal type approval procedure is described in these IEC standards, the additional tests you might investigate and find out some routines, what you want to test and how you want to test it to satisfy, let's say, the mariner when he uses the system.
Yeah, you need to hold the microphone closer. It's hard to hear you.
What shall I do? Too close? Too far? This way?
Perfect.
I'm not made for a microphone, so. Yeah, then we have it's better? Yeah? Okay. Then we have a carriage requirement for active systems, which was introduced recently by the IMO. And where's my mouse? And normally when I do the ACTIS course at the university, I see some old guys who are navigating the ship, and you could see in their eyes a calculation. They say, well, what is my ship? What is my time? And when I'll be retired. So you could see it, and then that's how it works. So this is just an information for you. When the IMO introduced the carriage requirement for active systems, they realized that the training or let's say the knowledge of the user of the systems is not enough and is not well reflected with the training standards. So they introduced by STCW a Manila Convention, which sets the minimum training standards for navigators using active systems, and these minimum standards are very detailed, but in general they are saying two different parts. Active system must be, or users of active systems must be trained in two different ways. They need a generic training and they need type-specific training. What is the purpose of doing this? We have an idea? Why do we need two trainings? The idea is that for the generic training, you have let's say an intellect background about what the system can do, and you know the theoretically what happened if you choose this setting or this setting. So this is the point. The type-specific training is saying that you know exactly which button you have to press. And I am myself, I'm a very good example of a generic training idiot. So I know everything in theory, what the active system can do, but if you would let me do this with an active system itself, I wouldn't have a chance to do it in a short time. So I don't experience in the button pressing process. But on the other hand, if you have a guy who is very trained with type-specific settings, he can say, well, I can manipulate and I can bring to you a very good display, but I have no idea what I'm doing with the system behind this. So that is, that's a problem, and they want to avoid this. They want to say you are trained with a theory and you are trained with a practice with a system on board. That could cause problems for the ship's owner. If you have, let's say, 3 ships with 3 different active types, then you need to train your staff with 3 different type-specific trainings. So, and that could be a real challenge. And we have shipping companies in Germany which have 160 vessels. So it is a problem. And some of these shipping companies, they decided to go with one active system. So they either said, well, we will use only Furuno systems, or we will use only SAM systems. So that makes the crew handling more efficient than doing this with many different systems and train the mariners on all of these systems. There's one interesting aspect more: the type-specific training could not be conducted by trickle-down. So it's not possible to say, I was trained, I heard this here, so we have only three guys who are experienced with, or who were trained with the ENC production, and we train the next one. So for the actors it doesn't work, so the trickle down is not accepted, because the idea was to say what the teacher didn't learn, he couldn't teach. You will have always a loss of information when you transfer your knowledge. You take up 20% of what I'm saying here, but you can transfer to your next person, let's say 18%, and this will learn 10%, and when you have the end of the line, you might end up with 0%. So that's normal. That is, I think that's human behavior. Yeah.
I don't think now we have many type of activities. So normally for education training, what type of activities they are used for the training? What the activities type that is used for the training?
Yeah.
What type of activities they are using? Is it Furuno? Because there are many type of activities available in the market now.
Yeah. Normally they should train on the system which is on board. Exactly with the system. If you have a Furuno system on board, then you should be trained on a Furuno system. Not for the generic training, but for the type-specific training. If you have a Transas system on board, then they must be trained on the Transas system. And there are some investigations whether you should train on this specific type of system. So sometimes actors manufacturers, they change the philosophy between two versions. Transas 2000 is entirely different from Transas 5000 or whatever thousands they have now. But that is important to be trained on this, on the training, on the system which is on board. Yeah.
From your experience, how effective the use the CBT for the type-specific training, computer-based training for the type-specific training?
Yeah.
Any effective you can see?
I don't know.
We do receive a request.
Yeah. Sometimes I read that some actors, let's say, training providers, they have generic, and and sometimes the type specific. There are many different versions on the market. So you could send a person on board where they train the navigators with a system which is on board. They could use it computer-based. I have seen that they offer remote, let's say, remote controlled training, that you can do it on your computer at home. You shouldn't do it in a training facility. And then there are a lot of different versions on the market.
The challenge is a lot of shipping. You cannot train because onshore is very high cost for them.
Yeah.
So some shipping ask whether is it possible
To have it on board,
yes.
probably, yeah. But this is allowed. Yeah. Some training facilities, they are conducting trainings on board. I know persons from Hamburg who are traveling around the world just to be on a vessel from one port to another port and to train with the onboard system. They don't do the generic training on board, but they do the type-specific training on board. And I'm 2 minutes over. And then we have is wrong. Moment. And we have some ENC standards published by the IHO, which are in relation to the ENC production, the ENC distribution. We have S52, which is the chart content and display aspect. S57, it's well known. We are using, hydrographic offices are using this every time to model or to provide it transfer dates, to provide the database. We have recommended ENC validation checks. We have a standard for the production of raster navigation charts, which is not related to ACDIS itself, because an ACDIS which is running on raster charts is not longer an ACDIS, it is a raster chart system. Data producer code and data protection scheme are also some standards which are related to the ENC production. Some of those S62, I think, was a part of S57 in the past, and it was being removed because the update frequency was too high. So S57 itself is frozen, and then you would investigate a new version of the data producer code once per year, once per every 6 months. So the update frequency was not able to handle sufficiently with S57, so they removed it and they built in own standard for this. Data protection scheme is standard test data sets for ACDIS as well, and they are also updated very frequently. You know, if you have, or if the IHO introduced new features to reflect the reality of the world, then they need new features in this S64, and that is also a very relatively frequent updated standard. And S65 is in a general guidance published by the IHO for hydrographic offices who are intended to produce, maintain, and to distribute ENCs, and that is a summary of standards, summary of workflow, proposed workflow to produce ENCs and those things. I'm pretty sure that you know the difference between raster charts and vector charts. Just to summarize it again, the raster chart is just a replicate, is a digital image of the paper chart, and the vector chart could offer much more information. So theoretically, if you try to read a raster chart, then you could see here there is a blue dot, a darker blue dot, there is a light blue dot, and you could not see that this line belongs to the 4 meters depth contour, or this belongs to the 6 meters depth contour, and this is the area in between. So this is limited to the capacity of nothing. It's just a replicate of the paper version, and if you want to access the information which belongs to which line or to which feature which you see here, then you have to zoom out or to zoom in just to find, let's say, the 4 or the 6 here. Or you could put, theoretically, many 4s here, and then one day you will find a 4 which is probably the indication that could be a 4 meters line. So it's not really good. On the vector chart basis, this is built up mathematically, and on each of these lines you can easily see that this is a 6 meter line, and this is a 4 meters, is the area between 6 and 4, and so on and so on. So that works quite well. And if we transfer this to ACDIS systems itself, then we have a very anonymous actor system. I tried to remove everything which could be assigned to a manufacturer, so that's very independent, I hope. And still problems with this computer. So, and if compared to the Actors world and to the two systems itself, if I have zoomed in a way that I see only a red area on my screen, I have to identify what is behind this red area. And when I use a vector system, then I can easily see that a lot of information is behind this. A lot of information is behind this red area. We have, we can see that it's a C area, a restricted area. We have some quality of data, navigation system of marks, publications information is behind this. What I'm saying here is, this one is just a reflection of what I learned from the trainees. When I teach Actors Basics, and they say, well, we get a set of sync delivered, and we haven't to do any.
Must be just in Germany. But
yeah.
For example, we allow the distributor to provide in sync format.
You allow this? Yeah.
Distributor.
Yeah.
Some distributor can. Yes. Some distributor, I don't want to mention name, have converted into sync.
Yeah. But under the
because the
mandatory Actors,
the user prefer.
This.
For example, this is not hydrographic office business. So in the agreement, we allow the distributor if they want to provide the ENC in sync format.
Yeah.
it's more complicated than that, but it's fair enough.
So, but finally, for the learners of you, safe journey.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Regarding presentation library. If I'm not mistaken, IHP have produced the latest presentation library. So I just want to know how the procedure when the IHP produce the latest presentation library, how the OEM of like this, how they get the update, and is it possible that we can directly update, take it update from the IHP, and then we update to like this without go to the OEM? Is it possible?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I know what you're asking, but we have to choose our words carefully. You're not required to use S52, the presentation library. You are required to achieve the results that the presentation library can achieve based on what the appearance is in the Axis Chart 1. But more and more manufacturers do not use the presentation library. They use some other means to achieve what the presentation library can accomplish. Does that make sense? As to the updates, it's a real problem. Updates to the presentation library, because these are not always implemented at the same time by all manufacturers, nor are they implemented the same way. Even if they're implemented at the same time, they're implemented differently.
But that is a big problem to access, or to let's say, to get to the system on board, to update the system. If you, let's say, if you use Transas, for instance, you can assume that you have Transas offices around the world who can get on board and run the update, but you might have some other Actors OEMs who have who might provide very good active systems, but they have only a headquarter elsewhere on this planet, and then
Why Jens is right about the SCNC direct distribution probably being the future. That this is a one way to alleviate problems with the data or with the display of the data, that it will be done more consistently. But it's, at present, I don't think it's the majority.
Yeah.
Maybe in Germany, but not elsewhere.
okay. What I
Majority of users use systems that have second distribution, but it's not the majority of the active systems that, or the distributors that do it.
Good point.
okay.
Good point.
So just for information, I have prepared a little website which covers all of these ACDIS basics and ACDIS in operation. This is written in German and in English, so if you like to refer to it, please feel free. And I'm happy to be just 5 minutes over.
Excuse me, can I have some question? You mentioned there is a rank in Europe. The rank in Europe. So you brought out your slide a few issues in neighboring
This one?
neighboring country, like still mean the depth contour. Will the rank resolve this issue with your rank? Because
Yeah,
your
yeah, no,
slide-
yeah,
slide-
no, yeah,
slides
yeah.
there.
The slides were example how different interpretation of different features or feature values, what could happen if you do this. And in the past, this is this is an issue between, let's say, Germany belongs to the rank ICNC, Denmark belongs to Prima. So it's not a question whether Germany and Denmark can work together. It's a question whether Prima and ICNC can work together. And if they are combining both databases to harmonize the ENC features, let's say cross-border between Denmark and Germany. So, and this was a problem in the past, but I learned that they are approaching each other and they are working now very closely. So I think the rank will try to find a solution or to bring this to the hydrographic office attention to say, well, you have an issue between your neighboring country, please solve this. So I know we have had issues between Belgium and the Netherlands in the Terneuzen-Ghent canal. There was on the Netherlands part, or the Belgium-Netherlands part was well surveyed, and there was a well designed layout of the water, and on the next country there was a gap of 5 meters between it, so each active system was crashed when they passed this 5 meters with no coverage, and after the 5 meters it continues with a layout like a canal, so with maintenance steps, and that was also an issue which they solved in the meantime. So there's a lot of work behind this, but this was an example how or what could happen if you don't do this. Let's say if you don't do this cooperation with your neighbor, and if you provide the information in two different ways. So the ranks normally do this, and they try to fix it.
This problem will solve by this S101.
No, S101 will not solve this problem. S101 is just a different standard to provide ENCs, but this is not solving this problem. So harmonization between cross-border is still an issue. We have an interesting aspect. We have had a project at the EU which was called BLAST. You will probably will see some slides in this week which are related to this BLAST project. And there was one of the subjects with the working package I was involved was to identify those gaps between features cross ENCs, cross-border. And the initial idea was to say, we will try to investigate ENCs between two different countries. Let's say it's between Denmark and Germany, or Denmark and Norway, and for instance. But then the hydrographic offices, they start to run this tool, or let's say, let's park this for a moment. So, but when we defined a set of features which should be checked by this tool, and then you load two ENCs, run the check, and then the tool provides you a list of features which are not harmonized. The most of the features have problems with the SCUM-in. SCUM-in was an issue, so definitely. And then we introduced this to compare ENCs between different countries, but then certainly hydrographic offices, they realized, well, I can use this for my ENCs as well. And then it was being done by Germany and by Norway, I know for sure, and we found a lot of gaps in inner German waters. So, and I spoken with our ENC production guys, and they say when we produce ENCs out of the HPD, then we will not have these issues, because it is, let's say, it has no limits. This is a database. This is a special term, but this has no limits. So they use you make a cut between where you need to cut to create two different ENCs, but the cut is they cut exactly at one point. But then when they go with the ENC from the HPD to the ENC based on paper chart, then they have these gaps. So that is saying producing ENCs based on this single database could be solve the gaps problem, but not the problem between two different countries.